Welcome to Beat Diabetes, and we are going to continue with our look at one of my books. This one is the book that sold the most, called 60 Ways to Lower Your Blood Sugar. The first episode I did about this, I just looked at the very beginning few pages and made some basic remarks about it, but just in the last few days, I have really gotten into looking at this book and reading it really for the first time in quite a while. The first time I took a real good look at it in a while. Of course, I wrote it, but I was kind of surprised when I found out that the copyright was 2013, which meant I wrote it in 2012. And I started thinking about it. Well, that's 12 years ago. That's a long time ago that I wrote this book. And one of the things that I found as I went through this book over the last few days is it's not as good as I supposed it would be. I hate to admit that. Now, I still think it's one of the better books out there. But the Dennis of today has changed a lot from the Dennis who wrote this in 2012. And of course, that is to be expected. Anybody who can go 12 years and not mature and increase in knowledge and so forth, there's something wrong. I didn't get stuck in 2012 when I was writing this book. I've learned a lot since then. So as I looked back over the book, I saw things that I wasn't exactly crazy about. Now, there were a lot of good things as well. But let me just give you a few examples of things I didn't either like or that were just left out. So one of them has to do with a little chapter, and these are all very little chapters. There's like 60 different chapters, about 60 different aspects of beating diabetes, and most of it's about food, and simply about what you eat, what you don't eat, and how you test your blood sugar, and so forth. One of the little chapters is about managing rice. That's the title of the chapter, Managing Rice. And I talk about how that rice is not really your friend, and you should test yourself and see what rice is doing to you. And if it's doing too much to raise your blood sugar, you need to cut back on it. But from today's perspective, the way I think today, I wouldn't have even included that chapter, or at least I wouldn't have written it that way. I would not have said manage your rice. I'd just say don't eat it. There's so many good substitutes and there are so many things you can't eat. Why would you fool with something that is that explosive and dangerous when it comes to blood sugar? So the Dennis of this book was quite a bit more moderate and mild compared to the Dennis of today. Today I'm more in a slash and burn mode rather than let's be mild about it. Let's be a little bit on the conservative side. Now, I will say this, just this book alone, even if this is all you had to depend on, you didn't watch any of my videos or anybody else's or didn't read any other books, if all you had was this one book, this would probably get most type 2 diabetics into the non-diabetic range. But it probably wouldn't be enough to get you down much below that. It might get you stuck in pre-diabetes, and that is exactly what happened to me. When I was writing this book, in fact, I was at a pre-diabetic level. I was at somewhere between 5.8 and 6.0. In some ways, I'm looking back and I'm thinking about all this and I'm saying, Dennis, you didn't even have any business writing about diabetes. You hadn't thoroughly whipped it yet. But of course, the title is How to Lower Your Blood Sugar, 60 Ways to Lower Your Blood Sugar. And this book will do that for sure. But it's just not enough. So anyway, managing rice, I would certainly change that. There's not a word about time-restricted eating in this book because I didn't know about it. Nobody was talking about it. I didn't practice it. I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and even some snacks, which today, no breakfast for me normally, and then no snacks in between anything except on Saturday night. Benedict and I will usually have a snack while we watch an old movie on Saturday night, but it's going to be a low-carb snack for sure. But otherwise, no. So again, why no time-restricted eating? Didn't know. So I've learned a lot since those days. There's not a word about chaffles in the book. And to me, that is inexcusable except for one thing. Nobody knew about chaffles in those days. Again, 12 years ago, nobody was talking about chaffles. Nobody was talking about Dash mini waffle makers. A chaffle, in case you don't know, is simply shredded cheese and an egg. Sometimes you can throw in some other ingredients. Usually I'll put in a little almond flour and some heavy cream. And it's a great substitute for bread. You can make it as a dessert. You can put some cream cheese over it and some everything bagel seasoning and have it like a bagel. There's just so much you can do with chaffles that to leave that tool out of your toolbox, again, is ridiculous, except that I didn't know, nobody knew, nobody was talking about it. So again, it's a dated book, and this latest book that I'm working on is going to be a lot more current. So a lot of things. I talk about fruit. Let me just read one thing I said about fruit in this book. And first I talk about how you have to be discriminating, and yeah, they do have a lot of sugar. They can raise blood sugar. Absolutely true. And then I write, I'm not suggesting diabetics never eat fruit. Fruit is a great source of vitamins and part of a healthy diet, but we must be discriminating. And then I mention about a rule for you can maybe have half of an apple instead of a full apple, half of a pear, etc. Today I would simply say, apart from the berries, forget about apples. Just divorce the apple. Don't eat another apple the rest of your life. You can live without apples. You can live without oranges. You can live without mangoes. Have a few berries, and obviously an avocado is fine. But I wouldn't be nearly so moderate as I was in those days. Basically, if I were reading this book today and I weren't the author and I had bought it off Amazon and I was going to review it and I had to give it 1 to 5 stars, I'd give it 4. It's good, it's solid, and you can look at the book and you can see the foundations that led to where I am today. And there's a lot of good stuff. I'm not saying it's bad at all, but it's just not quite as slash and burn and just total victory as I would like it today and as I recommend this day. So obviously I have changed. That's shouldn't be so shocking. I remember I did a review of Dr. Mark Hyman's 2 books, and one I think he wrote around 2012 and one 2016. And I liked the 2016 book so much better than the 2012 book. 2012, he was still stuck into super nutrition, don't worry so much about the carbs. 2016, he's talking about how that saturated fat is perfectly fine and really dealing with the issues that are important to diabetics. So he had obviously come a long way since then, and I had as well. So why have I changed? Why am I different? Well, part of it is what I mentioned earlier, and that's just the normal way. If you're sharp and you're learning and you're growing and you're investigating, you should be further along in 10 or 12 years than you were before. But another big reason is my Beat Diabetes channel. I interact with diabetes all the time, far more than most doctors would. I mean, I'm talking to them, I'm communicating with them, I'm interviewing them, I'm reading their comments, I'm responding to some of their comments. I'm just totally interacting with diabetics like every day. And I've learned a lot, and I've been challenged by some of them. Some of their victories made me feel second class because it's like, well, they're lower than I am. I'm supposed to be the mentor, and they're looking to me and say, Dennis, thank you so much. You really helped me. You saved my life. I'm doing so much better. And I'm like, you're doing better than I am. Or at least I was saying that. And so it motivated me to start working harder at it. And when I wrote that book, I was just pre-diabetic. Now I'm well below pre-diabetic and hitting around 4.8 to 5.0. So my targets have changed. There was a time I was satisfied. I was kind of proud. In fact, if you watch some of the videos, a few of those early videos I made that I think are still up, I mentioned I'm pre-diabetic, and I was kind of proud of that. Granted, that was a whole lot better than being fully raging diabetic, like my mom was, and losing my legs, and thank the Lord, I've still got my legs. But after a while, I wasn't satisfied. And that brings me to a very significant point, and that is that you have to decide how far you want to go with this. Some people are saying, well, if I can just get below 6.5, the diabetic standard, 6.4 or lower, I'll be happy. Or some people say, well, if I can just get into the fives, I'll be happy. And to me, that's a very noble goal and one that should be legitimate, especially in your early days. Just get into the fives. Just get there somehow. But if you stay with this and you keep watching videos and reading books and hearing what's going on in the world of victory over diabetes, chances are the time will come where you'll not even be satisfied to be pre-diabetic, which stops at 5.7. If you can get into 5.6 or lower, you're no longer pre-diabetic according to the American standards. And eventually you may want to go lower still. You've got to decide that. You're going to have to live with the consequences. And some people, somehow they manage to live pretty healthy, even with some of the relatively higher numbers into the sixes or even low sevens. And others, they're just falling apart with an A1C in the sevens. So that's on you. I can just say, here's what has worked for me. And it seems to me that most of us ought to reasonably expect to get below the pre-diabetic range. Another thing that has made me change is watching other YouTubers. There are guys like Dr. Jason Fung and various ones, Dr. Ken Berry, and I watch them. I don't just make YouTube videos about diabetes. I watch YouTube videos by others about diabetes, and I learn some things. And watching some of them has helped me tremendously and given me more information and more knowledge. When I started talking about chaffles, guess what? That wasn't just some heavenly vision that came into my mind one day. Dennis, here's what a chaffle is. I watched a YouTube video about chaffles. And I thought, well, it makes sense. You're talking about cheese, shredded cheese, and an egg. There can't be many carbs to that. And lo and behold, I got into them, realized how good they were, how useful they were, how many different things you could do with them. So just watching YouTube has helped me tremendously and has changed me. And another conviction I've come to is that normal glucose is so important and so health-producing. It trumps every other consideration. If you ask me, what would you rather do? Get a lot of nutrition by eating a lot of fruits and have higher blood sugar, or get less nutrition, less vitamins, but absolutely normal blood sugar, I'd go for the normal blood sugar. It is so proven time and time again that abnormal blood sugar and the corresponding high insulin surges that come with it for most type 2s are so dangerous and so inflammatory, and they cause so much havoc in the body. And believe me, I know about some of it, even though I was never a raging diabetic. I've had frozen shoulders where I could barely move my arm, and they lasted for several months. Finally, they would start to go away. My arm is not, my right arm particularly, is not totally normal yet. I can raise it, and I don't suffer regular pain, but once in a while I'll sense it's not quite normal. There's not quite the freedom there. And UTIs, and just several things that have been a problem for me. And then arthritis. My hands are knobby and all half twisted for a reason, and that is I was getting high blood sugar, bouncing glucose levels, high insulin surges, and a lot of inflammation, and that's why I've got fingers like this. So I know that you don't even have to be extremely diabetic to start having problems. And after a while, I'm like, well, how much nutrition I get is not as important as keeping my glucose low. Now, I do take a multivitamin. I take vitamin D3. I take fish oil oftentimes. So it's not as though I don't care about nutrition. But to me, the biggest thing, and here I am, I'm cruising into my latter years. You know, how long I have, only God knows. But my determination is I want to cruise into the end of my life with relatively normal glucose. And if I don't get all the vitamin C that I could, well, that's okay. I do take a vitamin C tablet, so I get some supplements. I know that's probably not as good as the real thing coming from food. But you can get quite a bit of nutrition from salads, and I do eat salads frequently. So anyway, as Rocky said, I think it was the Rocky movie where he fought the Russian guy, and at the end, at first the crowd was against him and they were booing him, and finally they started to respond and they cheered him. And he said, if I can change and you can change, then maybe we can all change. So looking at this book, it's like, well, I have changed when it comes to my insights. And I now practice time-restricted eating. And I don't mess with most fruits. And I have made some changes. I don't eat rice. So I have made some changes. I'm stricter now than I was. My A1C is lower than it's been in probably 30 years. It's good to make healthy, positive changes and to grow. It's called growing. And we need to grow in a lot of ways. Spiritually, by all means, most important. Find the source of life, who is Jesus, and then grow in Him. Grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But grow in your mental abilities and as much as you can. Granted, when you get old, you lose a little bit, and I certainly have. But grow as much as you can in your knowledge and in your health. So if you want to get this book, it'll help you. Like I said, the foundations of who I am now are pretty much locked in here. But there's some other things that maybe I wouldn't exactly agree with these days. God bless. See you again soon. I want to announce an exciting new format that will be added to my Bible teaching channel, which goes by my name, Dennis Pollock. Most of my uploads have been on Mondays, where I post videos that I call Video Devos. These are short talks that focus on one particular Bible topic. And I'll continue to post these Video Devos on Mondays, but now I'm adding a new type of video that will be posted on Thursdays. These will involve Bible studies that Benedict and I will do at our dining room table. We'll be going through various books or sections of the Bible in a relatively short, easy-to-digest, user-friendly format. So catch the Video Devos on Mondays and the Bible studies with Ben and me on Thursdays. I believe you'll be blessed.